All right, hello, my name is Catherine Vincent. I'm sitting here with Mr. Jabari Sims, and he had agreed to be my coachee for this semester. So we are going to be just talking about our experience with the lesson that I observed with the writing essay, and just kind of looking at the information from the Grow report and talking about how we could go forward and make the lesson better and see what supports that he actually would require from me. So, Mr. Sims, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Mr. Sims. I teach ninth grade English, and I have been doing this for about 3 years, and I'm enjoying working at the school thus far.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Sims. So I guess we could just kind of reflect on the lesson that you taught 2 weeks ago. I think it's been about 2 weeks. The students are working on writing, and you want to chime in?
Yeah, so right now we're working on an argumentative piece where the students are writing persuasive essays and using those persuasive techniques to convince an audience. We've been really working hard to improve our writing as we go throughout the school year. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now. So we're on Unit 2, argumentative writing.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and I am supposed to use this Grow model for planning my conversation. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to click up here on this Grow model. Okay, so the goal was for students to actually use the rubric to effectively assess their own writing piece. And the outcome was that students were to compare their writing pieces over a 6-week span. Hopefully they will be able to see the growth in their writing assessment. So Mr. Sims, how do you feel like that would go? Like, well, how do you feel it went with the students using the rubric to assess their writing?
I think it's a wonderful piece of data that the students could look at to self-reflect on their own writing. So a lot of times teachers do write notes on their paper and give them feedback, but a lot of times kids don't really keep their work. They don't really have an idea where they're going. So to have their work and say, oh, hey, I was here and now I'm here within this 6-week span is really, it kind of motivates them to almost like a self-competition, so a competition to kind of make sure they get to a certain point.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just some things that I actually noticed, that when the students were actually filling out the rubric, I felt like they were taking the accountability and taking ownership in their work, and I felt like that was a great assessment tool to use for students to kind of take, that accountability and, peer edit with their partners to see how they did what they need to revise and how they need to move forward. The reality assessment, how do you feel like with the reality of that was like with the Grow model, like with the writing tracker, I should say?
So what do you mean by the reality?
The reality, as if, like, did it happen? Do you feel like that students actually demonstrated their mastery by using that, or do you feel that the students may have needed, more time or more type of like coaching to kind of help them get there to where they need to be?
I think that there was actual real growth within the 6-week span, and kids, they come in with a foundation of what writing is, and as each week they learn and implement new ideas and new brainstorming activities, and they actually interact and collaborate with their partners to peer edit, they see that real growth and say, hey, 2 weeks ago I wasn't even checking for grammar. Now I am. I'm doing much better. So I think the reality is that students are seeing real growth.
Okay, great. What do you feel like the opportunities or the alternatives for the students to use the writing tracker, what are some other things that you think that we could, I guess, the students could use to kind of be able to visualize and say, hey, this is where we are, this is where we need to be? Do you think that there are any opportunities?
Outside of the writing tracker, I think they should use a rubric. So the rubric has different it has a score for each level of their writing, and also has an explanation. So I think we could incorporate a rubric to kind of say, hey, I'm writing satisfactory, I'm writing unsatisfactory. So I think a rubric could also help them visualize and actually push their writing.
Okay. So some things I noticed with the different demographics in your class, especially the special ed population and the ELL population. Some of them need a lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your kids seem like they kind of need a lot of pre-teaching of actually what the rubric is, how it looks, how they can implement it. Some of the ELL students with their language barrier seem like they need help trying to chunk the material down, what the rubric is, how they can make, how it could be of importance to them, and why they need to use it. So do you feel like, I guess in the future, maybe the rubric could be differentiated for those?
I do, and even we could even make it the students make the rubric.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I feel like the students could come up with what they think
that's awesome.
Each portion of the rubric should be, and what students need or what students don't have. So I think that could be very student friendly, and when they have it, they say, hey, we made this as a class, and
right.
we're going to use this as a class to assess our own learning.
I like that. Students make their own rubric. Okay. And I'm just taking notes. I'm going to look back at this video as well to kind of fill in my transcription log. So now we're to the who, the what, the when, and the where. When I looked at this, the grow form, and I was looking at the feedback from my professor that was actually kind of stating that I needed to, I guess change what I had here. So how do you feel like, I guess, like collaboration, like how important do you feel that is, like when it comes to like your planning of your lessons for your students?
Okay, I think collaboration is key. The students need an opportunity to learn from each other, to share ideas, and also being that we have a high population of students that are not from the United States, it gives them an opportunity to learn more English and acquire more English while they're here. So I think collaboration is key, especially for an English classroom where a lot of things are subjective, and they can really put their heads together to make inferences, to determine main ideas. So collaboration is key in an English classroom.
Mm-hmm. And then also, like, do you collaborate with your colleagues and stuff from the literature department? And I guess you guys have like sessions where you kind of sit down and look at pacing guides and see where you are, see how your students are doing.
Yeah, so I collaborate with the 9th grade English team. We meet up once a week and we just discuss what we're doing. We share resources with one another. We also have an academic coach. She comes in just to make sure that we're aligning our work to the standards. So yeah, we work pretty well together.
Okay, and then also I noticed that for the observation with the work period, the kids were actively writing and they seemed like they were on topic. But one thing that I did notice, like I said, without actually properly closing out the lesson, is that something that I guess the coach kind of does the coach that comes in here, does she make sure that everyone's doing a 3-part lesson? And and doing their required openings and closings to make sure that students kind of can wrap up a lesson and know what they were, doing for that day.
Yeah, I think the coach does a great job coming in, making sure the kids are engaged into the topic before we start. And also, I think the coach does a great job of closing, as far as making sure we reflect on what we're doing, make sure we have checking for understanding. And yeah, so the coach is doing a good job as far as making sure we do have a solid 3-point lesson.
Okay. And then you did say for the future that you would be incorporating the differentiation with the students who are English language learners and the students with disabilities, differentiating their closing activities to where it's more, I guess, conducive for them to kind of see it more visual.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I'm actually was making this coaching log transcription more as a reflection instead of a problem solving conversation. I felt like reflective would be a lot easier. So that's what we're doing, just kind of reflecting on the lesson. How do you feel about planning your content? Do you feel pretty strong?
I feel pretty strong and knowledgeable about the English language, and I love to read, I love to write, and it's almost like we just learn something all the time, and we share ideas, we have discussions on different topics. So I'm pretty competent in my field, and I feel strong.
Okay. How would you feel like when it comes to planning content, instructional strategies, curriculum implementation, and assessment of student work? Which one do you feel like would be like most important as it relates to your classroom?
Can you list the...
Yeah, so planning content, like planning your content, instructional strategies, curriculum implementation, and assessments of student work, in key partnership with colleagues, and kind of show you which ones do you feel like would probably be like your primary focus.
Content and then instructional planning.
Okay.
Yeah. So I say content because I'm always thinking about the what.
Oh, that just led us into our W. Thank you. Okay. The what? Love it.
And instructional planning, I always think about how can my lessons be culturally responsive? How can I keep the kids engaged? What do the kids like to read? Can I find, can I make the lesson more teen friendly? So I also think about how I'm going to, I think about the what, and I also think about the delivery. Am I using technology? Am I having the kids collaborate? Things like that.
Okay, wonderful. So your planning and content, and then what would you say would probably go next as your area of focus? Instructional strategies, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Instructional strategies, so I'm assuming when you're talking about instructional strategies, you're thinking about how you can meet the needs of your students.
Right.
Okay. And then what about the other areas? Curriculum implementation, materials, assessment of student work, and key partnership with colleagues. Which one do you think will go next?
I would say curriculum implementation.
Okay.
And basically, I feel like that's important because we do have a pacing calendar to follow, and there's a lot of updates within the district. So just kind of staying, abreast to whatever the curriculum and how they're giving us information to teach the kids. So I think that's something that to kind of stay on top of as well. That's very important as I plan and go about.
Okay.
Teaching.
Okay. And then assessment of student work and key partnership. Which one do you feel like will go next?
Assessment.
Okay.
I would say assessment of student work is because I want my planning to be purposeful, and I want to see real growth. So and also I need to see if I want to reteach something. So if I assess the kids, give them a quiz, and they're not doing so well, that's when I go back to planning and seeing what content, maybe the content I didn't use was effective. So I would say that would be next, success in the student work.
Okay, wonderful. And before, I know for sake of time, the bell is actually about to ring, but you said when we talked about the what, that actually brought us to our W for my Grow report, which is the who, what, when, and where, and when. When you talk about the dynamic in your classroom and your ELL learners and your students with disability learners, what type of support do you feel like you would need to kind of reach their needs?
I would say I would probably need more like graphic organizers, more visual aids, maybe resources such as like online translators, things like that. Any little resources that can help aid them and help them understand the material a little bit better would be helpful.
Okay. So thank you so much. So for the sake of time, we have to wrap up today. We'll finish recording tomorrow. I want to thank Mr. Sims for part 1 of our video, and we will come back tomorrow. And I am Catherine Vincent. Thanks so much. We are back on our coaching session. I'm back with Mr. Sims. Due to the planning periods, we had to cut our session yesterday a little short because the bell had rung, and we both have planning at the same time, but we both have is it a fourth period?
Mm-hmm.
Fourth period class. All right, so we're just gonna kind of continue where we left off, and just kind of talking about the rubric for the writing assessment, the writing activity that the kids did. I did hear a lot of students actually stating that they liked the rubric. They felt real positive about it. What about you?
Yeah, so it makes them accountable. It sees where they lies, and it lets them know when they're scored based not off of somebody's opinion. Mm-hmm. That they're scored based off of a rubric that tells exactly their lines to their paper. So I think they see that the rubric is a good thing, and they strive to do better on the rubric.
And I like the way that you're actually observing the kids, and they started a writing tracker as well. I think that's that gives them time to actually record the data on their writing assessment for themselves. That's really good. Were you able to model that rubric before you actually gave them that after?
Yeah. So what we did was I used my projector, and I projected the rubric, and we went through each level of the rubric, and we also had sample writing pieces from the state, and we looked at those pieces, and we all made sure that we had the same idea of which each paper lied, as far as whether it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I think it was effective, and I did model it.
Good. Now, as you reflected, on your lesson, what were some examples of your labeling, I guess, in terms of the rubric, of your students' thought processes, like that you used, if you used any?
As far as teaching, so I guess as an example, one thing from the rubric might says uses specific examples. So we would go through the paper, and if the student has specific examples, we would say, okay, this student is very specific and they're relevant, and they're supporting what the idea of the paper. And we would look at samples that didn't have specific examples. Hey, that's very not specific, that's kind of vague. So this doesn't lie as a satisfactory on the rubric. So I think that answers the question.
Okay, nice. So overall, you feel pretty good with everything?
I feel pretty good. I feel like the students are knowledgeable, and they're taking accountability for their work, and they see that their writing is scored based off a rubric, and they need to make sure they meet a certain criteria on the rubric.
Okay. With everything, with the rubrics and your writing trackers, what do you think the next steps are going to be? Kind of considering for the overall learning process for your kids in terms of writing.
I think the next step is just every time they write is to get better, and also
Mhm.
the writing tracker, which is their data, is their piece to say, hey, am I improving? So it's more so taking ownership. They have the structure, they have the foundation, but it's about their own drive and their own collaboration with each other. So I think that those are the next steps as far as more so taking more ownership and pushing to their next level.
Okay. Good. I like that. You want the kids to do better. You want them to see where they started. You want them to track their growth. I think that's a really positive way for kids to kind of see where they are. Um, okay, um, so okay, so with our coaching sessions today, Mr. Sims, how do you feel? Just with today and yesterday, how do you, as you reflect on what we spoke about, says, what did this process do for you? Like, what did the process, how do you feel like the process worked for you?
I feel like the process was successful. I feel like students are starting to see the bigger picture of what we're doing. I'm not just assigning work and they're just doing it. They're seeing that what I do matters and how I do matters, and also the things that we're doing. They have to take on their state test, so they know that they need to meet a certain standard. So I think that overall, what the work we've been doing in this class is good, and it's it relates to the overall goal, which is passing the state test.
Okay. Um, and speaking of the state test, I do know that this school has, what is it, one semester state test for ninth grade lit com. So the students are going to be expected to perform well in November. How do you feel with implementing your writing tracker, planning your lessons, making sure your pacing is fine, with your collaboration with the data coaches and the ELA coaches, and your content area colleagues? How do you feel, with kind of going into a test about a month away?
I feel good. I do feel supported with all those groups that you mentioned. Um, I think now, with the test being a month away, it's more so having like a weekly diagnostic of where we're at. So if there are any reteaching moments or are there any resources available, just to make sure that I'm using those and making sure I'm constantly looking at the data saying, hey, maybe the kids got it, maybe they didn't get it, or how can I be supported, who can I reach out to? So I feel confident that we're going to do well this year. I just think it's more so just tracking where we're at and see where we're trying to go.
Okay. Excellent. And as far as like, I guess like a final plan, what do you think, like as far as me, helping to support you, like, is there anything that, you would need from me, like as a final plan, just in relation to even this project that I'm doing for my class? But I know there's coaches that work in here, and they, their positions are to support teachers. But as far as like next steps, I know you said you want the kids to kind of grow and do better, but anything as in relation to curriculum?
In terms of curriculum, in terms of looking at standards, just any resources that you could have as far as testing resources,
Okay.
any activities, reading activities, I feel that might be effective, that are going to push kids to get to understand the standards and to do well. I think those are some things that could help support me while I'm planning.
Okay. Testing activities and resources. Okay. And I'm going to just kind of stop right there. Okay, we are back on our for our coaching session. Okay, so excuse me. In terms of your reflective practices and what did I say? I'm sorry. I'm at a loss here. I'm trying to keep up with different um, areas that I need to make sure I address. Oh, in terms of the goals of your lessons and standards, how do you feel that your goals are aligned with Common Core standards? And um, does DeKalb County have a different type of standard that you have to keep up with in terms of ensuring that you're hitting all of the pacing?
I think the school what I'm doing is aligned with DeKalb County, and I am keeping up with it quite fine. The goal for us right now is by the end of the unit, students will be able to analyze nonfiction text, analyze argumented text, and to find a clear argument, supporting evidence, things like that. So I think we're on target thus far. As far as the reflective piece, we've been using a lot of rubrics to make sure that we're meeting that criteria of the district, to make sure that we're meeting that satisfactory criteria. Also, to keep kids accountable, we're looking at where we started and where we're going. So that's looking at pre-test, and also looking at post-test, and looking at how far we've come from the beginning of a unit to the end of the unit. In addition to that, just constantly checking for understanding. So, I mean, I feel like as far as reflecting back on what we're doing, I think we're doing a good job. And as far as looking at the pacing and the overall goal, I think we're hitting the nail.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank Mr. Sims for actually agreeing to be a colleague that I can coach during this process for this semester for the requirements of this course. And I want to thank him for his time with actually allowing me to videotape our conversations with our first coaching session. And that is it. Any last words?
No, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you. All right.